migrants. And in this context, we invite at this moment to independent journalist José Olivares. We are joined by José Olivares at this hour. Hi, José. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
What are your first impressions of this U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's speech?
Well, it was certainly a very, very interesting speech. I think, the most significant phrasing that he used was that, we are going to be entering the golden age of America. The golden age of America begins right now. He spoke in very overt Christian language, saying that he was saved by God in order to help make America great again. And so it was this kind of ultra-Christian, ultra-right discourse that kind of also was a bit of a callback and a desire to return to the post-World War II era in U.S. history, in which U.S. strength around the world was strongest, in which the U.S. Economy was strongest. And so it's interesting. There's a certain method to his madness when it comes to trying to address the problems that are taking place in the United States. But while he wants to return to this post-World War II type era, he is limited and constrained by the system that we live under and other external factors. Obviously, today in 2025, he's stepping into office in a different world than in 2017 when he first took office. Obviously, the 2020 pandemic was a huge blow to the economy internationally. We're seeing the results of the conflict of the war in Ukraine. Obviously, there's a genocide in Gaza. The U.S.'s sort of loss of strength in the Middle East with the withdrawal of the war in Afghanistan, and also a stronger China and Russia, and a strengthening of the BRICS countries. And so what's interesting is, though, even though he's making a lot of promises, some of his promises in terms of economic growth and prosperity might not be as successful as he wants them to be, due to the limits of the system overall and due to the limits of imposed by these external factors. But we will see some significant changes in policy when it comes to immigration, energy policy, tariffs, and taxes. And we're going to see an even more aggressive approach towards Latin America by this incoming Trump administration.
Has promised to deport thousands of undocumented migrants. He also mentioned it today and called those arriving at the frontier as criminals even. What impacts would it have on U.S. daily life and economy? And is it even possible to do so in such a record time as he has promised?
Well, what we've heard from federal agencies, especially Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the federal agency that is in charge of deporting immigrants from the U.S., they are looking at these promises that are being made by Trump, and the speed and the quantity of deportations that he wants to take part in. Even ICE and officials with ICE are saying this is not possible in the timeline that he is giving. Obviously, there are millions of immigrants in the United States. They are the workers who run the economy. They make up a large part of the workforce in the U.S. And so deporting and taking part in these mass deportations that Trump is promising will damage the economy. And obviously the speed and the amount that he wants to take part in is not going to be doable. And those aren't my words. Those are words from the federal agencies and federal agents who are in charge of these deportations. However, we will see, as he's promised, some different policies in regards to immigration, policy changes that will help his immigration approach to immigration and his approach to a very handed, draconian approach to immigration. We're seeing him promising to bring back the Remain in Mexico policy, which will force thousands upon thousands of asylum seekers to wait in Mexico under extremely dangerous conditions. We are seeing that he wants to send troops to the border, and we're also seeing him wanting to put forward executive orders to end birthright citizenship, to put forward more aggressive policies in terms of immigration. And so, even though the deportations might not be as quick or as great as he's promising them to be, limited by federal resources, we are going to see other different policies that he's going to be, taking part in to significantly attack immigrants in the U.S.
And given his violent approach to the immigrant and the migratory process, how would you forecast U.S. policy in this new era of Trump towards Latin America?
Well, I think it is interesting to see what he said in this speech, right? He says he wants to be the president that brings peace, that's going to end any sort of conflicts around the world. And that's kind of what he said in his first administration, right? When he was elected in 2016, 2017, he said he wanted to end the wars. He said he wanted to stop any international involvement from the U.S. government. And so while he did kind of slow the reins of American international expansion in certain parts of the world, when it came to Latin America, there was a completely different story. We saw the Trump administration support far-right presidents and politicians throughout Latin America. And so I think we expect to see the same thing with this administration. So we're seeing some of the cabinet elections that Trump has been putting in. We're seeing people like Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. And we see the growth of progressive governments throughout Latin America. And so I think the U.S. government is going to take a bit more of an aggressive approach when it comes to Latin America. We're going to see a lot more pressure being placed on Mexico in order to stem and act more against immigrants that are crossing Mexico to reach the U.S., specifically immigrants from Central America. But we're also going to see him align himself with far-right presidents like he did during his first administration. Obviously, we saw during his inauguration today that Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, the far-right president of Argentina, was invited to take part in his inauguration. And so we're seeing how Marco Rubio has also expressed a lot of aggression towards Venezuela, towards President Petro in Colombia, and his policy of total peace, paz total. And so it remains to be seen, but we're going to see some very aggressive actions by the U.S. government towards Latin America. The most troubling one that I want to emphasize here is the idea that Trump is going to designate drug cartel organizations in Latin America, specifically in Mexico, as terrorist organizations, which opens a door to some significant military and covert action by the U.S. government to go against these criminal organizations in Mexico. Now, some experts have said that this is a really bad idea to do so because these criminal networks, they behave like corporations. They are massive. They have thousands upon thousands of people on their payroll. And so how does attacking an organization like that look like logistically? And how would that look like by the U.S. government? Well, people are very worried that it could open the door to some tremendous abuse by the U.S. government if this takes place and if these types of military covert actions are able to take place in Mexico specifically to target these organized crime groups.
So in his inauguration speech, Trump mentioned his concern over the climate events that are taking place in the country. For example, the devastating fires that are taking place in California. He also mentioned his attempts to improve economy regardless of the climate change. And also, on your opinion, what would this mean if he is prompting, for example, also the energy industry to be boosted as well? What impacts would it have in climate change and the efforts of worldwide efforts in this aspect?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting, and it aligns, with his approach to energy policy also during his first administration. And I think a big part of this also has to do with his base. Obviously a lot of Trump supporters are people who have been economically pushed aside by the entire U.S. government and system, and so they see Trump as an escape, as someone who's going to help them and save them. Obviously we're seeing higher cost of living, higher rents, people losing their jobs, and a lot of these manufacturing jobs that are being lost in the U.S. are going to other countries, and so they see this as a problem. And so when they hear Trump saying, "Oh, we're going to drill, baby, drill," or "We're going to invest in building more cars," "We're going to get these factories up and running," this is very much a call and an appeal to his supporters, to his base that voted for him and for him to reach the presidency. But it shows no regard to the problem of climate change that countries around the world are trying to address. Now, obviously, climate change cannot be addressed under the current system that we're living under. There are significant limits that are placed upon governments and companies in order to kind of make any sort of headway when it comes to addressing climate change in a significant way. But I think obviously his appeals, and by saying things like during his speech, "Oh, we're going to drill, baby, drill," is very much an appeal to the voters, to his base, by saying, "Listen, I hear the problems. I hear the lack of work that you have. I hear all of these problems." And so the solution to that is to bring back these manufacturing jobs, regardless of how it's going to affect the climate, but we're going to bring back these jobs. And so it remains to be seen exactly if the limits that are imposed on the Trump administration by the economy, by economic constraints and international constraints and external factors, if that's going to play a limit. But it was very much an appeal to his base that voted for him.
Trump also assured that his country is going to be a peacekeeper. However, regarding the genocide in Gaza, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has assured that he has Trump's support in keeping Israel's aggression on Palestinians. In your opinion, what's the position Trump's administration will take on this conflict ahead?
Right. Well, it's very interesting that we heard in his speech that he wants to take credit, in a way, for the deal that was reached this week between Hamas and the ceasefire deal that was reached this week between Hamas and Israel. And it's very interesting, right? Because this was a ceasefire deal that could have taken place, that could have been resolved over a year ago. When the genocide really was ramping up. And so it's going to be interesting. I think what we saw during the first Trump administration was very much a closeness towards Israel, very much a closeness towards Israel's policies and in support of Israel. And I think we're going to see the same thing this time around. And so, yes, he's saying he wants to not engage in any more conflicts, not be involved in any more wars, and he wants to portray himself as this peacemaker. Let's see how that goes. We're still very much waiting to see what's going to happen, what he's going to decide. Is he going to stop the flow of arms to Israel? That's very doubtful, right? We see his close relationship with Israel, and so we understand that he might still continue to provide arms and weapons to Israel, as Joe Biden did, in order to support this genocide and to perpetuate the genocide. And so we're going to see what's going to happen in the Middle East when it comes to Israel and Palestine. Now, when it comes to Iran, I think it's something interesting to also keep in mind. Trump obviously is promising not to engage in any more conflicts, but with Iran, it depends to be seen. We're seeing that the nuclear deal, he cast it away during his first presidential administration. But I think because he's promising an end to any sort of conflicts, that leaves Trump with really only a few options when it comes to Iran. That's to negotiate a deal, or to accept that Iran is going to have a nuclear capacity. And so we're going to see what happens, and if his language of becoming a peacemaker is going to conflict with some of the more aggressive foreign policy hawks that Trump has in his cabinet, or that Trump has historically aligned himself with.
Trump also mentioned that democracy is at stake. And in this context, the victims of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol are claiming for this violent event not to be forgotten. Is Trump still a threat to democracy?
I think it's an interesting, more philosophical question. It's interesting because when we ask questions about U.S. democracy, I think it's important to understand how it, under Republicans and the Democrats, we're seeing. I think it's important to put into question what exactly democracy in the United States means when it comes to not just the Trump administration, but also under Biden, also under the first Trump administration, under Obama, under Bush, etc. So what really does American democracy mean when it comes to these things? We're seeing a lot of people, a lot of Democrats clutching their pearls and being very afraid of the Trump administration and saying, this is where democracy ends. Trump is going to attack U.S. democracy. Well, what has the U.S. democracy really shown us? And truly, what have the Democrats done in order to kind of combat this, what they call as a fascist threat? We've seen essentially the Biden administration in these past few months provide a lot of gifts to the Trump administration. By extending contracts, by putting in place a lot of different policies that are going to help the Trump administration carry out, especially when it comes to immigration, the right-wing immigration approach. But also when it comes to democracy, what exactly do we mean? I mean, we see obviously Jeff Bezos, we see Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, some of the richest people in the world, standing here at the inauguration supporting Trump. And so it's a very blatant kind of sign that says, listen, this government is really going to benefit the rich, but it's exactly the same thing that we saw under Democratic administrations as well. And so when it comes to the question of American democracy, I think we need to ask ourselves, democracy for who? And who has American democracy historically benefited? Has it truly been a democracy for the majority of the working people in the United States, or has it, regardless of administration, benefited the wealthy and the rich? And so I think it's an interesting question, and something that I think we should also be critical of the Democrats in this aspect.
Thank you, Jose, very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We were listening to José Olivares, independent journalist, in the context of the swearing-in ceremony of re-elected President Donald Trump.